Good morning, Councillor Vera Waters, Walsall Metropolitan Borough Council.
Morning, Councillor Adrian Warwick, Warwickshire County Council.
Morning, Councillor Ian Mackey from Birmingham City Council.
Hello, Andrew Burrow from Solihull, the rural bit of Solihull.
Good morning, Martin Smith, Independent Chair of ARAC here in observing capacity.
Good morning, Councillor Ryan Rector from Coventry.
Councillor Cathy Baton, Association of Black Country Authorities.
Good morning, Lindsay Roberts, Statutory Scrutiny Officer for the Combined Authority.
Scrutiny Manager.
Dan Simpson, Governance Service Officer.
I'm Laura Shuff, I'm the Chief Executive of Combined Authority.
I'm Kieran Stockley, I'm the Head of Legal Services.
I'm Kate Taylor, Head of Finance Business Partner in Strategic Planning and Deputy Sectional Budget Officer.
John Godfrey, Interim Exec Director, Housing, Property and Regen.
Tom Linton, I'm Co-opted Business Representative from the committee.
Jackie Honing, Head of Environment, Combined Authority. Lead Officer, Senior Lead for Homelessness, Combined Authority.
Good morning, everyone. Jean Templeton. I'm Chief Exec of St Basil's and I am Independent Chair of the Homelessness Task Force.
Claire Darmy, Head of System Change and Inclusion at the Combined Authority.
Lovely, thanks everybody for that. So I'm going to move on to Chair's remarks. And usually I've got three comments to make this morning. So I'm guessing all elected members will have seen the email from the Office of the PCC requesting that the PCC be able to come and present to this committee following the mayoral Q&A. I am going to be responding to the PCC office, and that request is going to be refused on the grounds that it's a Q&A with the mayor, not with anybody else. And to be fair, we could have a whole host of organisations who, after a Q&A, want to come and put their points of view to what was said. So the minutes will go to the board, and the PCC has the ability to attend the board and can then question anything that is included in the minutes. So that will be going out shortly. If you recall, some time ago, we discussed allowances for this committee. We were waiting for royal assent on the levelling up bill. That has been received. So for constituent members, I believe allowances should be able to be paid by the end of November and backdated to June. Right? Yes. Super. Okay. Homes for the Future draft strategy. You will have seen that paper has been pulled from this morning's meeting. The reason for that being that it was included because we've had a number of housing papers, and it was also a recommendation from Housing Officer that we included it for this meeting. However, I'm led to believe that there were discussions taking place by senior officers around the public release of this paper and it going to come into scrutiny, and that it wasn't in a position to come at this point. I don't know whether discussions continued on Friday, but I felt in fairness to the committee, because I had seen the document and it was extremely chunky. For it to come out late on Friday, it wasn't fair to committee members. So I took the decision that as we haven't got anything agreed by Thursday afternoon, that paper will be pulled. Laura, do you want to comment?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. So it's apologies to committee members, but we want to make sure we have a robust forward plan, but equally that the papers are where they need to be really for the committee to consider them. We took the decision that we needed to spend more time getting the finance implications of this paper right. So it's apologies. We don't often pull papers and certainly not to this committee, but we didn't want to have the wrong conversation with the wrong information. So just apologies from me, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So I suppose my only comeback on that would be that I am aware it had already gone to Housing and Land Board. So I think it's about the processes being robust in the first place, really. Okay, that moves us on then, as we still don't have any more constituent members having arrived. We will move on to the homelessness task force update. So if I can hand over to Neelam and Jean.
Shall I start? Thank you very much, Chair. And it's really great to be here to kind of. We're not asking for any decisions, and it's this report. We're going to the leaders board to update, inform on the progress, and hopefully secure support for the direction of travel and some of the priorities that we've identified in the next year and beyond. Just a little bit that we've reframed homelessness, if you like, across the region in as the ultimate exclusion, because if you fall out of all the other things, that's where you end up. So being reframed as the ultimate exclusion, it's then everybody's business, because so often it's housing, it's local authority housing teams, or it's the charities, or it's those that are dealing with it. And we know the immense pressure that all of our local authorities are under and the knock-on effects that has. We know that the difficulty in this region alone, only 3% of our private rented sector is available to people on benefits. So that puts even more pressure. I know it's shocking, isn't it? That puts even more pressure on social housing. And we know we've got 20,000 plus on many of our waiting lists. And we also know that the impact of that is that then our local authorities have far, far, far too many families, children, disproportionately women and children, disproportionately women and children from Black and minoritized and Asian communities in those accommodations. So the equalities element, the inequalities that is hidden by the ultimate exclusion is significant. And that's why this report, and I think it's a brilliant report, and it's all down to this woman here, who is this individual person. We are very light resourced in this space. But you know what? We have got your officers across the region. 6 years this task force has been going, and still everybody is there on a meeting. Everybody is doing so. Everybody is working together across politics, across sectors, across regions to focus on what we're trying to achieve. So within the report, you'll see we've explained where that's coming from. We've explained this different way of working, really, that it is about adding value, not adding work. We have brought collectively, now we've got over 20 million into the region, now 25 million, because part of the Trailblazer devolution deal, there is another 4.5 plus million coming in to develop the rent simplification scheme from central government funding. So that wasn't what we set out to do. We set out to design out homelessness, to tackle the systemic issues that often drive the personal experiences and the challenges that all of our local authorities have. And we've done that in a different way. The task force works differently. As I say, cross-sector, cross-region. The detail is in the report in terms of who's involved. But also there is a members advisory group. So the 7 cabinet members for homelessness across the 7 local authorities are that members advisory group, initially chaired by Councillor Sharon Thompson from Birmingham, now chaired by Councillor David Welsh from Coventry, working together to see how they can add value, how they can break down barriers, overcome challenges, barriers, and have an influence not only locally and regionally, but nationally. Because by coming together and identifying what the actual challenges are and what needs to change nationally to design out homelessness, they're able to meet with ministers, they're able to lobby collectively. And sometimes, and we have just done one recently, where it's the chair of the members advisory group, supported by the members advisory group, the mayor and myself as independent chairs. We've got the cross centre. So when this task force went from being a mayoral priority and was adopted by the whole combined authority in 2019, and it became part of the mainstream, this is why we want to ensure that the mainstream is actually committed and is supported to help accelerate the systemic changes we need to make. Because we can go on doing project stuff, and that's brilliant, don't get me wrong, you can see the impact, but the systemic drivers continue. And so what we're asking for through this report is to continue to endorse and support, to see it as an equalities issue and to support the work of the task force, but also to help us accelerate that at systemic level. And that means within this body as well, within the combined authority. And Laura and her team, hugely supportive of that. But everybody's hugely busy. Everybody gets pulled into things, and silo working is often across the piece in every system the norm. And it's about how we rise above that and work together and see this as everybody's business. So they're the bits. And then I'm going to hand over to Neela, because we've also identified the priority areas that we're working on, and we would really like to sort of seek that endorsement as we go forward. Thank you.
So I think, kind of Jean has kind of recognised and talked about the biggest challenge that's facing us at the moment as a region is the fact that we are very limited in how we can accommodate households that are either at risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness. And I think part of that challenge is also how we kind of frame homelessness and how we look at it. So there's a lot of rhetoric from central government around rough sleeping, and we tend, when we think about homelessness, to only think about those that are, the people we see as we walk through city centres and town centres. And you will have seen in the report, we've put the kind of figures for the region. And when you look at that, the numbers that are rough sleeping in our region are relatively low. That's not to say that, we should condone that, that's fine. But we seem as a nation to be kind of quite obsessed with a very small number of individuals, when in fact there is larger numbers of households who are hidden, what we call the hidden homeless, who are in temporary accommodation. So we forget about them because they have a roof. So we think, oh, that must be fine. But a roof is very different to having a home. And we have 5,500 households in our region who are homeless, who are probably living in bed and breakfast accommodation, in hotels, in travel lodges, with no kitchen accommodation, miles away from their children's schools. So the impact is much bigger. And that's the challenge. And that's the challenge of the task force we are looking at now. We do a lot of work in rough sleeping. We've brought in millions, whether it's for the Housing First or whether it's Rough Sleeping Initiative. And we continue to do lots of work. Over the last year and a half, we've been part of an early adopter framework, looking at how we define rough sleeping and how we measure it better. So we are doing a lot of work, and we seem to be keeping numbers, still, yes, the last 3 years after lockdown, yes, it has increased, but it is still relatively low. What we want to now really face and look at is those households in temporary accommodation, those of which we can't move into social housing because there is none, and also the fact that now the private rented sector is even harder to get people into. We say 3%. I mean, the last time we looked at Zoopla data, I think for the end of March, yeah, Jean said 3%. But if you look at the figures for 3-bedroom properties, so let's just say the average family household, 1%. 1% really in numbers means nothing. And I will turn to the councillor from Solihull, because actually when we did a deep dive in Solihull, at some points in time, that's 0. So this is the seriousness, of it. So forgive me if I'm pressing on that issue. So Jean's alluded to the fact that we now want to prioritise the kind of systemic change element, and we will carry on doing all the projects, but really we need to think about where are the systems where we need to affect change, because homelessness is not where you first present when something starts going wrong in your life. You don't, day one, you don't wake up on day one, you go into a homelessness service. You will go into many services who may fail you before. So that's our biggest kind of priority. But the one I am kind of going to turn to is around the children and families piece. What we now want to do is we really want to look at how we can kind of influence and lobby government on increasing local housing allowance levels. So that's the housing benefit that is paid to families on benefit. So as I've said, 3% is accessible. We need it to be nearer to that 30%, because housing benefit, local housing allowance, was always intended to be able to access 30% of the local market rate. I think in order for us to do that, we need to make an economic case. And what we're doing at the moment is we are tendering a piece of work to really look at how we make that economic case and where those cost savings can be made if local housing allowance is increased. I think there is a tendency with Treasury at the moment to really just think about the housing benefit bill in silos. They don't want to increase it because they know that if we increase it, rents are still increasing and you're forever playing catch up. What we want to show through a cost benefit analysis really is to show, well, if we increase local housing allowance and the private rented market is opened up to more households, it will reduce the cost of temporary accommodation and other forms of housing that are not best, and they are also quite expensive too. So we hope you will endorse us in kind of doing that piece of work, and we'd like to come back to you when it's done and kind of share those findings with you. So for us, those are the sort of the two main priorities. Obviously, we've shared the report and we're hoping you've got some questions for us. So I'm going to stop there and give you guys some time to reflect and comment.
Thanks very much for your report. I mean, I think the difficulty we're going to have this morning with endorsement is if we're not core at something, but you know, it will then go to the board who will either ratify or not, as the case may be. I just wanted to make a comment before I hand over to colleagues, about the economic case. I mean, for me, the long-term economic case is clear. It's about children and families thriving. It's about them becoming an inclusive and valuable and contributory members to the tax system, to the community, succeeding in education. So whilst you might not have an immediate cost benefit, stable, secure, healthy accommodation is the key, isn't it, to all those other outcomes that we desire for our families in the region or in the country. So that for me is a clear long-term economic benefit. So I've got a few people indicating. I'll go to Councillor Akhtar first.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see that you are lobbying to the government to increase the local housing allowance. That is a big problem. Because at the moment, local housing allowance does not cover the private rent. Wherever you go, whichever city you go, it doesn't cover.
Yeah.
And 3%, the people who benefit the private renting house is totally unacceptable. We do need to actually increase the local housing allowance to cover most of it, if not all of it.
Yeah.
And also there's another problem with the housing stocks. Right to buy, for example, is the one I think we should lobby to government to abolish that, because there should be another way to help people to buy a house, not the social housing, because we've seen, the people buy a house on the cheap, a few years later, and the house is back in the market. So it's not going to help us to keep our housing stock. Another issue is the rent. The rent is going up and up and up, and doesn't matter, as you said, if the government actually increase the housing allowance, the rent may go up.
Yeah.
I think the government need to look into it, how actually they can cap the rent, because at the moment it's a free, and a lot of landlords are actually, making a lot of money out from the vulnerable people. I think we need to lobby to the government to look into it, if it's possible, to actually cap the rent as well, because it's totally not sustainable. Because it doesn't matter what we do, if the rent goes up and up, then local housing allowance not going to cover. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, can I respond to that, Councillor? I think those sort of areas that you've talked about, right to buy, rent caps, that conversation and discussion comes a lot in the members advisory group. We have had conversations about that because it is hard to replenish properties once they've been brought. And you're right about kind of capping rents, but I think the challenge we've got is around making sure that we are able to kind of build more affordable homes, genuinely affordable homes in the region, because at the moment housing is a commodity. Because there's a shortage, it is expensive and it is a landlord's market. If you had more, and actually you made it a tenant's market, naturally those rents would have to stop at some point. So and that obviously is the kind of medium to long-term strategy, isn't it, that we should be focusing for. But I think I've made a note of those and we will take them back to our members advisory group to look at, well, how can we build some of that into our work over the next 12 months. Thank you.
Councillor Warwick.
Thank you very much, Chair. I welcome this report. It's very well written, and I like the proactive approach that's being taken. When people are homeless, we're reactive, but if we can get in before that point and try and prevent homelessness, I think that's a fantastic strategy. It's all right talking about rent caps and things like that. The key thing is here, we're not even seeing these homes being made available to people who are on benefits. So how do we work with the private sector? Because it's okay saying all cap will do. If the homes aren't even being made available, and we're saying in some areas there's no private rented properties at all being made available, how do we work with the private sector to encourage landlords to make those homes available and to give them some surety that they can let the property out with confidence? Because that really is what we're coming to, isn't it? So if we've got to find a way of working with the private sector to encourage more private landlords to let to people on benefits, whether that's a way of guaranteeing deposits and things like that. But there's got to be a way, because we are excluding people from a huge chunk of the housing market if we can't overcome that problem.
Well, I totally agree with you, Councillor Warwick. That is the challenge, and you've got this kind of vicious cycle, if you like, that with costs going up for everyone, including landlords, with frozen LH local housing allowance levels, which are only covering 3%. So landlords have gone into other fields, and with the Renters Reform Act, which is coming down the line, slower than perhaps we'd all like, but it's coming down the line, then more and more are moving out of that private rented space. They're moving to Airbnb. They're moving, if the properties are really good quality, they're going upstream market rents, but they're coming out of this space. And then of course we've got the regional challenge with exempt accommodation and what's going to happen there as that spills out. What we need is a really viable offer for private landlords, so that those that have ended up going into all of those different routes, in order, some are individuals, some it's their family income, others are big corporates, as we know, and there's different motivating factors. But we need a viable offer that entices people out from the other things back into this affordable, genuinely affordable private rented sector. So one of the things that we have come up from the task force is a LHA plus model, so that for landlords who are prepared to take nominations, referrals from local authorities through that route, who have good quality, meet decent home standards, who give some security of tenure, that actually they would be within the same offer as the social housing landlords, that it wouldn't be LHA level. They could have an LHA plus up to an affordable rent level, so that we try, instead of losing more, we try and get them back into that space. But it is broken. I mean, it has been broken for some time now, so it's going to be quite a challenge to get back into that space again. But yeah, totally agree with you.
Councillor Waters.
Now, this is one of my passions. I've done loads of interventions myself and prevented people from becoming homeless, because you know yourselves, it's when they first become homeless, they need to be caught, because when they've been on the streets for a certain amount of time, it's their morale and everything starts to go down. So this means they're going to be harder to actually reach when they do get a property, because what happens is you can find them a property, but then because of the time they've spent homeless, they need outreach to actually get themselves back into the actual being in a home again. And this is sometimes where it fails, because they're left at their own devices and it just doesn't work. Now, what's a lot happening is HMOs. Now, HMOs, the rent on them is sometimes that HMO landlords will actually take benefits, but the actual rent that they want on those properties are higher than the benefits, and the person has to pay money out of their benefits to actually cover where the HMOs is. And another one is it's only 20% social housing when properties are actually built. So this means you've got the builder will actually have houses for sale, and also the landlord will actually the builder, the landlord who's actually going to oversee the properties will actually do what I call buy to let. They call it, everybody else calls it something else. It's 65% buy, 35% rent. So that will actually price a lot of people out of the market because they cannot afford, they need social because are on benefits, they've got disabilities and so forth. And they'll never, you know, it's a dream for them. They probably would like to own their own homes, but they are never ever going to be able to do that. And it's for those people we need to be catering for, and we're not.
It's lovely to hear everybody's in the same space. Yeah, again, you're right. Now, again, this is where, so our objective on this task force is designing out homelessness so that you have intentional prevention, inclusion designed into all of the mainstream strategies, policies, programs that this combined authority has, so that we turn that on its head and reverse it. So from 2026, the Affordable Homes Programme is coming to the combined authority. Real opportunity to ensure that designing out homelessness and having inclusive programs is designed into those programs. Fantastic opportunity. So yes, you're right. It is about really making sure, and that the houses of multiple occupation, the HMOs, so many, actually they should only be let at local housing allowance level, but so many have moved into the exempt sector because quite frankly they couldn't make it stack up. Others have moved in for different motivations. Yeah. But again, it's about, quite frankly, it's hard, isn't it? But we need all to rise above all of the issues and find out what is it that is motivating people to do things in the way that is not working for so many vulnerable citizens. And how, yeah, but then let's turn it on its head and let's say, what can we do differently that actually is a reasonable responsibility, and use our powers as well to make sure that it does work, because often we are collectively sometimes part of the problem. We operate in silos. We don't always think about the join up and the kind of interdependencies. And I think that's what's been so fantastic and so inspiring about those on the task force, officers at all levels, members, cabinet members, different sectors, public services, voluntary community sector, business sector, housing association sector, all committed to doing this differently. And opening our eyes to actually what we need to do. So, yeah, with you. Councillor McKee.
Thank you very much. You've sort of touched on it a bit. I mean, exempt accommodation to me, how should I put it? Be careful how I phrase it. The idea behind it is a really good idea. There are some good providers of exempt accommodation. I took part in an inquiry recently. It's eye-opening, some of the things, organised crime, the whole thing's going on there, and the whole thing's a total disaster, really. But what I was hopefully trying to get a positive point out, how much of exempt accommodation taking family homes out for this is a contributing factor towards homelessness, do you feel? And is there any way that it can, sort of the genie's out of the bottle a bit, but how can you turn it around to try and make a positive out of this area? Because the idea behind it was a positive to help people, but it's just turned into a money-making enterprise, and as I say, there's elements of organised crime involved as well.
I think what we've seen in terms of exempt accommodation, taking properties out for families, yeah, it definitely has, and especially for larger families. So we did a piece of research back in 2021 for families with children in temporary accommodation. And what we found was where you have kind of more than 3-4 children, those were the families that were spending 3, 4, 5, 6 years in temporary accommodation because there just wasn't anywhere for the size to move that household onto. So I think where that's had the biggest effect is larger households and also households with someone that may have a disability, because again, you need the kind of larger properties. We, over the kind of last 2-3 years, lots of work with Birmingham City Council, because they've been particularly affected by exempt accommodation. We did a lot of work on that, and we did lobby the government incredibly around kind of reforming the exempt accommodation. And obviously we've got the supported housing regulatory oversight bill coming into effect now. So we will continue to keep an eye on that and see what that brings in terms of powers and resource for local authorities to be able to kind of do something about those landlords that are not there for the good intention. But again, I mean, you know this anyway, but the exempt accommodation, the challenge is the kind of definition, isn't it? Kind of, you know, a little bit of support, whatever that might be. And that's been the challenge. But let's see what this bill kind of brings. But we will continue kind of looking at that and working with our local authorities.
Thank you for the numbers. I'm going to use those somewhere else. Within the government specifies minimum standards of size for accommodation, square meters per whatever. And as someone who's been involved in renovating a particular piece of accommodation for my brother, I know that he rented that out for years to couples, and it's only 30 square meters. Now, the law says it ought to be 50 if it's new. And I know loads of accommodation that is actually around 30 square meters for couples. And have we done any looking at whether those kind of barriers actually get in the way of building enough accommodation? Because it's nice to be able to have large accommodation. But if the choice is between that and sleeping on somebody's sofa, I think most people will go for the slightly more targeted accommodation. Now, this thing is full of risk, because as with exempt accommodation, there are some real nasty bits of work in the housing sector. But have we actually done any research to look at, could we build more affordable or social housing if we adjusted those for that sector only? The private sector can't get involved, but the public and affordable housing sector could target some very specific accommodation which is smaller at certain sectors, which they have done overseas, particularly in New Zealand. So I was just wondering whether you'd actually looked at that as a specific piece of work.
That's not something we've looked at, to be honest, but I'm sure that's something we can kind of have a conversation with John and his team in housing, property and generation, and just see if there is research out there. I'm not aware of anything, but we can have a look at that.
I mean, that would be great, because this combined authority is actually achieving quite a high percentage of affordable housing on its conversions. I just wondered whether we could get even more if we had some relaxation for public sector bodies who are producing accommodation specifically targeted at people who don't have a home, to use your, as opposed to they might have a roof, but they don't have a home. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Amanda Tomlinson next.
Thank you for your passion and continuation of all your hard work in this excellent field. Brilliant report, Neelam. Thank you. For me, Chief Executive of Housing Association, you know, absolutely housing at the core. But my question's not about housing. It's actually about sort of sustainability and the broader, because I think, you know, what's key in your report is actually the system and everything that sits around it. So in terms of sustainability, I was quite interested in your reference to the use of the adult education budget and skills and jobs. And I suppose my question is there enough in terms of funding or programmes or whatever might be needed to ensure the success? So once someone's in a home, absolutely brilliant, and that's absolutely essential. But it's about sustaining that, giving everyone the support they need actually to go on, prosper, you know, the whole economic prosperity of the region and so on.
You're right, Amanda. It isn't just about housing, is it? I mean, if you look at our pathway model, we talk about having a settled home and that move on support. And to be able to sustain a home, some households need support to do that. They can't always do it. I think there's another elephant in the room, and the other elephant in the room is that we have had a dwindling housing related support budget in every local authority for the last 10 years or so. So the kinds of support we used to see in the early noughties going out to households who had experienced homelessness has dwindled. So I think there isn't enough of it, but we do need to think about how we can kind of affect resources into the region to help people keep their home. I think you know, that's where we are. They used to be supporting people, then the ring fence got removed, and now you know, they're very small budgets we're dealing with in local authorities. Don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I just to add to that, really, you're right, Amanda. I mean, jobs and homes are massive protective factors, aren't they? And the link also the link between an income that enables you to sustain your home is a really important thing as well, because 42% of people on universal credit are working. You know, that shows that the interrelationship. Now, again, this everybody's business piece is really important. So we've developed commitment to collaborate toolkits, working with business in the community, working with other organisations, so that actually they can look at what is it that they can do to both keep people in a job, to ensure that that job is actually paying a decent real living wage, and that they can also understand that when people are experiencing difficulties, instead of sharpening your pencil and then it's, you know, kind of it's a sort of an issue that could lead to exclusion, that you find ways of keeping them in. So I think jobs and homes and linking the two together is really really important. So and again, what I'm seeing is that a lot of the business sector is moving on a bit in relation to social value and ESG. So tomorrow morning there is a business breakfast in Birmingham, and Lovells are launching a partnership with St Basil's and Birmingham Children's Trust and the Care Leaver Covenant for a jobs and homes pathway for young people that have been homeless, at risk of homelessness, or care leavers. So what I think there is a real opportunity for actually, you know, that kind of cross-sector support for jobs and homes. And I think we've all got a part to play in that.
Councillor Waters.
In Warsaw, our housing stock was transferred over to WHG in 2003, and along with it went the register at the like they call it, choose and move. Now we're actually gaining that back, so we're going to be gaining 52% of the people who are waiting on the housing register, and I myself am looking forward to that, because they are the vulnerable people who actually need rehousing. So now I've got something to get my teeth into, and I love it. It's one of them, because I actually worked for Warsaw Housing Group, so I've got a great understanding of how it all works. So it's good, absolutely fantastic. The other thing we're doing in Warsaw is when there's loads of properties around that have been empty for years, and we're actually looking at the moment to actually take over those homes so as we can let them out to families, because they're family, you know, the houses, the family homes, and that's what we're looking to do, is to actually, because there's government rules there, you can actually do that, you can actually take them over. We're actually getting into that and actually doing that, because we've actually done quite a few so far.
Okay, thanks very much for everybody's contributions. If I can just before we wrap that one up, because we are now Cora, so Councillor Kettle is safe. Yeah, I'd seen a recent report on home, I think it was in the Guardian, on homelessness, and to say that local authorities' homelessness services across the country are at financial breaking point.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, whilst I understand that, you know, you've got really good engagement from local authorities and from the elected portfolio holders. How, given the financial difficulties now that local authorities are under, and the fact that I'm fairly certain that a lot of the responses that we see, or I see as a councillor from my local authority's homelessness services, are not what they would have been perhaps 5 years ago, because of the decrease in budgets. So the responses now are different, and the duty to the way the duties are interpreted are different. So whilst I think we would all endorse the work you're trying to do, how do you overcome that? Because that's the major sticking point, that if you local authorities who have the responsibility don't have the money, you know, for initial responses, how do you overcome that? How do you?
It is the major issue, and I think you are all facing it individually. And I think what we're trying to do through this mechanism of the combined authority is do things collectively when we can. So have collective voice, because otherwise what's happening is we continue in the silos, risks get shunted all the way down. I know as a voluntary sector front door for lots of youth homelessness services, there is an expectation that our costs will go down. They're not. So we have to be truthful and real about the reality of the situation and the implications for some of the most vulnerable people in our region. And I think we have to speak up collectively and take every opportunity we can to say, this is false economy. It does not work. It costs more in the long run. It costs more to keep families in temporary accommodation or exempt accommodation than it does to provide a proper home. The point you made at the beginning, Chair. And I just think if we rise above all of the other issues and we speak truth to power with the evidence to go with it, we are much more likely to have an impact. Otherwise, we will all continue to do the best we can, as everybody does. We're all trying to do the best we can. But quite frankly, it is not going to be good enough. And that's the reality of the situation. And I think what you've got here is you've just got an amazing 6-year base of collaboration across sectors, across this region. And it's just been an absolute privilege and an honour to be independent chair of it.
Thank you. And I know you've done a huge amount of work in this space. I mean, I'm presuming that from Warsaw's perspective, you've done it through CPOs, the vacant homes.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that for me, you know, Dudley, I don't know what the figures are this year, but a couple of years ago, it's something like 2,500 long-term empty properties. That to me is just criminal. You know, where CPOs can be used, and you have then the local circular economy in terms of, you know, bringing those homes back into use. So I do think that's a really, you know, positive move from Walsall on that point. Councillor Bateman, finally.
Apologies for arriving late. So I've missed most of it, but I have got something that's burning at the back of my mind. Whilst all the recognition is for the way in which you produced and provided the paperwork and that, and you speak with passion, is there any other region that is doing better? And if they are, how are they doing it?
Good question, John. So we work very closely with Greater Manchester and with Liverpool City Region and also London councils. And I think when we come together as officers, it's a very similar picture, you know, be it local housing allowance, be it social housing waiting list, like, you know, we are learning from each other. We do constantly, but I don't think there is a magic bullet. And I think this is why we do look across the country too, to see where is it we can influence together as well. So that's, you know, I mean, there's pockets everywhere, but I don't think anyone's got a magic solution.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the recommendations then, I think we've noted number 1, we considered and added comments for number 2, and that just leaves for me to seek endorsement for number 3 on the task force identified priorities. and for you guys to come back and give us a report at an appropriate point in time. So do I have that endorsement from the committee?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. If you want to leave, get off and carry on,
Thank you.
absolutely fine. I'm going to go back now, record to the minutes. So we're going to take the minutes of the 4th of September. I will take them first of all for accuracy and then for any matters arising. So page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So we agree those are an accurate reflection of the meeting, yeah? Thank you. And then for matters arising, page 1, page 2. Dan, are you going to update on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Minutes number 148, which was the scrutiny protocol and the devolution accountability framework. I reported at the last meeting that it had been deferred, and this is the protocol that's coming out from the Department for Housing, Levelling Up and Communities. And members remember it will set out the standard by which the government expects particularly combined authorities who are exercising devolved powers, so ourselves and Greater Manchester, as it will set a scrutiny standard effectively, which we should measure ourselves against. And this protocol was expected earlier in the year. It was deferred at the last meeting. We hope to bring something to this meeting. It's still deferred, although we have now had firm assurances from officers in DLUP that it will be published on the 22nd of November, so later this month. Chair, I will share that with you and the Chair of Transport Scrutiny as soon as it comes in. And as I said in the last meeting, what we will then do is measure ourselves against that protocol, see where we exceed it, and I expect we will exceed it in a number of areas, but perhaps more importantly where we fall short, and then as a committee to have a discussion with you as to what we can do to raise those areas where perhaps we're a little short on what the government are expecting. So short message deferred, it's delayed again, but a clear hard deadline now that it will be announced as part of the government's autumn statement, which is 22nd of November.
Councillor Bateman?
Just a short one with regard to 147D. We had the exchange at that meeting, and in the report here it says that we've been kept apprised on the potential opening dates. And a couple of weeks later, it opened. I read about it in the newspaper, and I think that makes the point.
Will, do you want to comment?
With my apologies, I thought that had gone out to this committee as soon as we were able to say something in public. So I'll go back and find out how that happened. I also briefed your officers in Wolverhampton Council to brief you directly. So I'll pick it up with them as well. I have the email trail for that.
Yeah, I mean, communication is obviously absolutely critical, so we can follow that up. Yes. Any matters arising from page 3? Page 4, page 5, and page 6. Okay, thank you, everybody. And then we move on to the minutes of the 19th of October, which was the mayoral Q&A. So for accuracy, page 7, page 8,
Thank you.
page 9, and page 10. I think in terms of matters arising from that, I don't think there's likely to be any matters arising, but please correct me if I'm wrong. I've updated everybody on the letter that we had from the PCC's office. So are there any other matters arising from those minutes? Do we accept that they were true records of that meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Committee. So that moves us on to number 8. Jackie? there. You move.
Yeah, I suddenly seem a very long way away. I've moved just because I've got a few slides. We've got maps that we want to share, and I'll just take this opportunity to introduce Alex, who has joined me as well. Alex is on to comment to us. Sorry, I'm not very good at multitasking. Is on to comment to us from WSP and has been helping out with this piece of work. So he'll be helping me out with this presentation and answering any questions, particularly those of the technical variety. So I'm bringing this paper today. It's due to be presented at the Combined Authority meeting a week on Friday. And it's been on a bit of a journey, also involving overview and scrutiny. A small working group supported some early work we did on air quality and around an options paper that went to a Combined Authority board meeting in February last year. And so I wanted to bring this by way of an update to where we've got to and the plans, our immediate plans, hopefully following the board meeting a week on Friday. So just to give you a potted history of the framework and the aims, and we'll take you through the different documents that we produced. There was a regional air quality review previously developed that was quite transport focused, and there's been some work with TFWM on taking that piece of work forward. So as you'll see as we go through the paper, air quality is more than just a transport issue, and there are some significant areas of work that we can do around reducing pollution from particulates that go beyond transport. So transport is still an important part of improving regional air quality, but also combustion from domestic and industrial sources. And so what we've done with the air quality options paper that started to outline what that might look like, we've taken that forward into a formal framework. So the options paper that we previously brought to scrutiny was a piece of work we did with the University of Birmingham, who've got significant expertise in air quality. They ran a programme called WMF, and they did some desk-based research with us, drawing from work that Public Health England had done and their own research on some of the measures we might put in place. We took that to the Combined Authority board, who felt there was enough in that we should go away and explore those options in more detail through the framework that we've developed. And that has identified 145 different potential options where it makes sense to collaborate, or there is potential to collaborate at a regional level, obviously mindful of the air quality action plans that all your local authorities are taking forward, or air quality strategies. And what we've done, Alex will go into that in more detail in some subsequent slides, is we've evaluated those options against potential impacts on health and deliverability, cost of implementation, and so on. But I think it's worth pointing out that 2,300 people prematurely die from poor air quality in the West Midlands, and that's based on research that Birmingham University have done. But not only that, that is felt, the effects of poor air quality are felt unequally across the region. And you'll see from the maps that we're about to take you through where the poorest air quality is. And what we've tried to do through the framework is look at an increased focus on particulate matter, which is especially problematic, promote behaviour change across the West Midlands region. So look at what we can do to drive change, enable new actions, but also supporting the existing actions that all the local authorities are currently putting in place, but also look at how we increase collaboration and innovation in approaches to air quality across the West Midlands. So Alex, I'll hand over to you and I will scroll through the slides, so just tell me when you're ready to move on.
Perfect, thank you very much, Jackie. So the next two slides are representations of the modelling undertaken by WMF for 2021. So as you'll see, they, for NO2, which is typically dominated by road transport, they follow the major roads, and it's in the major city areas really. I think that's not really a surprise to many people. But if you go to the next slide, Jackie, the PM 2.5 emissions. So the 2,300 figure that Jackie mentioned is purely from PM 2.5. And that's the only pollutant which the government identify as within sort of any of their mortality metrics. And that is much more of a sort of a regional and not confined to road transport problem, because I think so there is some emerging research coming out of WMA which shows that for domestic emission is roughly about equal to road transport. So all of the emissions from boilers, log burning and everything else is roughly equivalent to all of the road transport, which is a really surprising figure, and I think indicates the reasons for the shift in policy and the actions we're targeting for the framework. So there are a number of key easy things which require behaviour change, such as reductions in log burning where it's non-essential. If that was reduced by 20, 30, 40, 50%, that could have huge benefits to public health, especially over the winter where there are events that do trap pollution much further. But as Jackie does says, the effects are unequal. So the pollutants where there are the more sort of the lowest indices of multiple deprivation, they are much more affected by pollution as an issue than more affluent areas, and they don't have the social mobility or the ability to be able to move to a nice area or even be able to mitigate their homes, which will be coming through with the climate and net zero policies coming forward. Next slide, Jackie, please. So for the framework, it's been sort of a very in-depth and collaborative process. So the initial steps was to have a look at the options paper produced by WMA and see where that could be lined up with existing policies for local authorities, as the local authorities have existing responsibilities under the local air quality management framework and other legislation. So we had sort of 3 or 4 meetings to discuss where they fit in, what they would like out of the framework, and then that led to the sort of the assembly of a wider advisory group and panel. So from the original options paper, which I believe was 122 options, we combined that against the emerging evidence base for the government's PM 2.5 Environment Act research and some other data sources, and we came up with in excess of 145 options, and it was essentially 145 options that the combined authority and the constituent local authorities could actually have the powers to deal with. So of those, we went through a red, amber, green long list appraisal just to see whether they were sort of practical and enforceable under various metrics. And of those that sort of preceded, a multiple criteria, a qualitative multiple criteria decision analysis process was used. So some of these interventions or options could be sort of assessed quantitatively, however, not all of them could be. So a qualitative sort of process was used to make sure that various metrics were used to see which ones would be preferable and would be cost effective and provide the best outcomes. And then those were fed into the rankings with the draft framework, which went to the WMCA Environment and Energy Board for approval. We went out to consultation with local authorities, key stakeholders and other interested parties in August. Had a really good response, had a collaborative session to see what they would like out of the framework, what they would change, and any sort of major issues they had, which fortunately there weren't really any showstoppers. And following that, the sort of the framework finalisation and the creation of an implementation plan for the next 2 years, which highlights the things which we believe should be started now. It's not a case of what can be done in the next 2 years, it's just what needs to get started to benefit quality the best. Jackie will lead on to that in a second. But so the consultation to date has been really wide ranging. So that's been through the local authorities, it's been the air quality, public health and planning teams. Lots of sort of discussions with Transport for West Midlands, how the local transport plan for TFWM, how air quality integrates with that, and how both documents can reference each other. Academics at the University of Birmingham through their WMA programme, my colleagues at WSPs, covering air quality planning, behaviour change and ecology. And we've spoken to external organisations such as Asthma and Lung UK, Clean Air Justice Network, Mums for Lungs, and the West Midlands Fire Service and everything else. So as I mentioned, the framework consultation event, we had 48 people attended from 28 organisations, and we had really good positive feedback. And also it's worth noting that air quality was the first module for the West Midlands Greener Together Citizens Panel. So the panel, amongst other things, produced 13 principles, which they believe sort of air quality mitigation and measures should be sort of scrutinised against. Not all of these can be, they're not all compatible with each other, but some of them do provide a picture of what the average population within the West Midlands feel like air quality should be assessed, and makes it inclusive and considers the population as a whole. Next slide, please. And so things of consultation, the combined authority itself has sort of limited powers for air quality. However, it's the local authority officers and the local authorities themselves that do have the powers. And there definitely was sort of a cry for support in sort of some local authorities, as just even consistent guidance on how things should be dealt with, behaviour change, procurement, monitoring. The local authority officers are very much stretched. Some of them aren't air quality sole specialists. So anywhere they felt the combined authority could help give sort of regional consistency and support was welcomed, and that sort of feeds into the lack of officer time, especially those where the air quality departments sit outside of public health or there isn't a clean air zone. So the regional approach, especially within the planning system, to make sure if a developer is coming to make a new 2,000 home development within the West Midlands, there is consistency within the local authorities on how air quality is applied within the planning process. And there are sort of, the local authority officers are very passionate and they have loads of ideas, but there isn't sort of a joined up approach to how air quality can be managed. And there is variations in how engagement monitoring digital is managed within the local authorities. And within existing air quality action plans, this is now started to change. There is a lack of non-transport measures. So through all this consultation, we sort of saw that there were sort of 8 main themes which are listed there, which we feel each of the 145 options sort of fell into. And that's pretty much how we got to the long form framework document. And I believe Jackie is going to tell you about the implementation plan, which you've had sight of.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So there is a implementation plan that went out with the paper for this meeting. I believe you had the Word version. It's now been fully designed to hopefully make it more easily navigable. But what we did through the consultation process and through the analysis that was done in the framework is to highlight some of the key priorities that we'll take forward over the next 2 years. And they fall into 9 discrete work packages. I won't read them all out, but they're in the paper. And then there are some that are significant enough to be standalone, particularly transport measures. And the reason we did this is the work around air quality is changing rapidly, and we thought that it would be good to set out 2 years worth of priorities, even though we've got the more significant framework. So it's basically our starter for 10 on the actions we want to put in place immediately. The way we're going to do that, and these diagrams are in your document, we're mindful that any new groups or any governance or documents that are set up need to complement what is already happening in the local authorities. So we want to make sure that there is a reciprocal arrangement between, or a relationship between what's happening with local authority air quality action plans, and also what we're doing through the framework and the implementation plan, and also to make sure those things align with other combined authority strategies. And also that there's clear routes in terms of the governance. So we're proposing the establishment of an air quality framework delivery group. It's not a new board, it's a working group to bring together officers in the local authorities, and that's something that they've asked us to do because they felt that would be valuable. And that will report into the Environment and Energy Board where that's appropriate, but also into the transport governance as well. And just to finish, we have actually already started working together and bringing some funding in to support some of the priorities that have been identified. So we've secured just under £1 million from DEFRA to begin rolling out a monitoring network and to establish a website to make data transparent for people across the region, and also to roll out some behaviour change projects and programmes and to do some engagement. So that's already begun, and we're working with your air quality leads. And we're also hoping to secure, subject to sign off, some funding from the Department for Levelling Up to extend the monitor network. So I'll stop there, but we've already started, hopefully, to provide some useful collaboration, and there's a lot more work to do, but hopefully now we understand exactly what we need to do by when. Thanks both for the presentation. Mark, do you want to raise your observation? Do you want me to?
Yeah, certainly.
Yep. So noting the same observation actually in terms of the governance structure. So going forward, do you see then that the oversight of air quality will just sit with TDOS, and this committee would have no remit over the air quality? Obviously, we'd be considering the 2041 progress. So, no, absolutely not. Happy to bring it back to scrutiny. I can add in a box to the diagram. That's fine. I think I was wrapping up in my head with the kind of combined authority board governance, but I can separate that out as a separate box in the diagram. That's fine. I mean, what I don't want to do is duplicate your work for you, because you know that's not the idea. But obviously, certain parts of air quality, as you say, quite rightly point out, don't sit with transport. So things about homes and would come here. Yeah. Yep, that's fine. Open it out for questions then to members. Probably been stunned into silence then.
I really welcome this. Now, this is a huge health issue, and I actually like the approach, which appears to be knocking off things that we can actually do rather than talking about bits of philosophy. I've got a number of points which kind of fit within this. The standards for chimneys on log burning stoves enables you to have a chimney that will put its stuff in a child's bedroom. I know this because I've got a case. People are installing log burners on estates, housing estates, where the houses are close together. The chimneys do not have to be above the highest point of the building. You get the slightest atmospheric problem and the stuff comes down. Can we actually have a look at that and see whether we can get some change in the government regulations? Because the only way out of it at the moment is the householder has to prove nuisance, take somebody to court by providing evidence. It's a nightmare. And it is a very specific thing. But when you get into those where the building regs are clearly inappropriate, I mean, it might be fine for a country property, but on a housing estate, people aren't putting log burners now into housing estates. So it fits within one of your technical boxes. I'm not exactly sure which. Second practical thing is you talk about the natural environment. Will we be looking at vegetation and its role in capturing, you know, the particulate matters? Would that fit within planning, or where would that fit? Because we've got lots of local authorities chopping down vegetation, but vegetation actually gets rid of particulate matter, it captures it.
Okay, so on the second point, we will certainly be looking at natural environment. The combined authority is the responsible authority for the local nature recovery strategy, so we'll be doing some significant work around that. And there is a separate piece of work that WSP did as an appendix, which we'll be putting onto the website when it's ready to look at the role of the natural environment. So yes, we do see that as an important role. I know it's not straightforward in that some plants exacerbate things and some make it better, which is a completely non-technical response. But yes, we will be looking at the role of natural environment. On the log burning issue, I think this is one of the areas where we're looking to support local authorities with consistency around planning. I know Walsall have done some work or have tried to do some work. Alex, can I hand over to you, because I know you've been involved in that with me.
Sure. So at the moment, there isn't any way to prohibit the use and of installation of sort of log burners at the moment, but and speaking as planning colleagues, it would be a bit of an overstep of planning to have it as a, you know, within new developments to prohibit it. But Walsall believe they have found a, not a loophole, but a way within the permitted development regs to where any sort of planning permission is required for an extension or anything else, to require there is a full assessment of the impacts. That is obviously going to be a very small percentage of people who can install log burning equipment. So I think as in the implementation plan, there is definitely people are fully aware of the impacts of log burners on either their own health or the health of others. So it's, you know, getting first in for the education, and then potentially one of the lobbying points for the sort of the region can be to press government to revise it. However, it's not in the current strategy. I mean, if London got rid of all their log burners, they would essentially take all the cars off the road. But they're not going to do it. So it's how we can develop the mechanisms to change people's behaviour, and then how we can get government and local governments to be able to reduce the instances of new installations. In terms of the vegetation, there are elements of the framework which do sort of mention that in the long form. A lot of that is related to sort of green infrastructure and planning, because if you just have along a street, you've got 10 trees just, you know, 50 meters apart, it's not going to do a lot. But if there's proper considered green infrastructure and vegetation between a new development and a major road, that barrier can have a, you know, a real significant effect on air quality. However, it's not as straightforward as that, because it can make it worse and generate street canyons and other sort of effects. So it does need to be carefully considered, but green infrastructure does need to be higher up the agenda, especially within planning.
Yes, it was that latter point of what should you do and where that there needs to be some firm guidance on, so it can be required of developers or road builders that we actually do the right thing rather than guess at it and get it wrong. So
definitely, and that would be one of the things which, so DEFRA at the moment are consulting and sort of as guidance for assessing PM 2.5 in the planning process. So ideally there would be a combined guidance on how air quality is assessed and the standards and designs in which developers should consider. So one of those things which could be implemented would be an air quality positive for large developments, where they have to consider the air quality benefits and impact at the design stage. And typically air quality within the planning process is an afterthought. You get a consultant a month before it goes in for planning and you hope everything's okay. So it's just making sure that air quality is higher up on the agenda and making sure we do plan for improving air quality where possible.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions I'd like to put to you. One is around the mobile sensors, which I think are an excellent idea. They're cheap, they're effective. Do local authorities have the staffing capacity to be able to manage those? Because I'm presuming it's about recording information and then uploading it onto the new website.
So that will be done by the sensor company. So they will be looking at the maintenance and installation. What we will need to do with the local authorities is make sure that we have permission to install them. So there'll be an element of involvement, but yeah, the maintenance, the data, the upload, all of that will be taken care of through the actual by the company that will be putting them in.
Okay, that did concern me because I know Dudley only has one dedicated air quality officer. And I'm thinking, how on earth is she going to manage to do all of that work? So that's really helpful. And I presume the siting of those mobile monitors will be done in conjunction with the local authority.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got the mapping from, so the mapping you see is modelling rather than real-time data, but we've obviously got the mapping that shows us the potential locations that we should be focusing on.
Alex?
Thanks. Yeah, so there will be so obviously the local authorities do have existing sort of monitoring at the moment, which typically is mostly for NO2. So that we've identified locations which we believe are hotspots, but they obviously have the local knowledge and they know where they want to focus on. So it'll be a collaborative process to make sure that they have them in locations which they see have issues. But also some of the local authorities have already said they are happy to have their existing sensor data on the combined website as well. So it'll be a sort of a regionally coordinated one-stop shop.
Can I just also ask as an addition to that? I mean, I think the way, and I'm presuming all local authorities do it the same, so it's the way the currently data is collected, it's assessed over an average, a 7-day average, I think, which highly congested routes during rush hour, the recordings don't necessarily give a completely accurate picture because of the way the data is recorded. Is that how it's going to continue to be recorded? I think that's DEFRA's requirement, isn't it? But is that how it's going to continue to be recorded?
It'll be as close to real time as possible. Obviously, it won't be like right in the moment. I'm not sure how long it takes for the data to come from the sensors to the website. I'm on a very steep learning curve with this myself, but it won't be necessarily. It won't be a 7-day average, as I understand it. Alex, correct me if I'm wrong.
So the average time that's reported to DEFRA, well, DEFRA require it depend on the pollutant. So for NO2, it's annually and hourly. For PM2.5, it will be annually and over a 24-hour period. So there's a mixture of what you report for the average, and then it will be sort of how quickly you can then get that in real time if there is an issue. So you can go from a 10-second average, you can go to a minute, 15-minute, an hour. So it really depends on the purposes of the data. The more regular uploads you have, the more sort of data you have. So if you have 50 to 80 sensors and you're doing it every 10 seconds, you're going to have a huge data burden. And is that necessarily going to give you the results you need? Possibly not. So then it's feeding into how you can warn residents of potential issues earlier on. So using forecasting and predictive modeling to say, okay, between these days, we know you're going to have an issue. You know, if you have certain conditions, you might want to prepare. So it really depends on how people want to be able to use it and whether it's a proactive or reactive system.
Do you have any questions from the committee?
Yes, once again, I do apologise for being late. But one aspect of this report that sort of comes home to me is that in many ways we've been very good at getting the message out that air quality is a problem. But I think there's more to do. And I think we can accentuate the quality of air by having road signs that change their format and warned about air quality on the road sign. know, I live near three quite busy roads in their own way. Woolscott Road and the Penmore Road, and the road going down towards Hagley from the hospital at Bradley Hill. And I was educated in a way on 2 or 3 occasions where walking down at Ombersley, and you think, what are we 20 mile away down at Ombersley, down towards the River Severn at Oldfleet, just above Worcester. But you come over the 449 and you come onto high ground on a day like today, when you have no wind and no cloud. And then you look across at the conurbation, you see from Wolverhampton all the way across to the University Clock in Birmingham. It's round all and full. The properties in the distance, you can see literally the air quality set out in front of you, and it's over 15-20 miles, so it's fairly consistent. So where I'm coming from is I think we can do more by highlighting black spots, encouraging people to have the air quality monitors in their home, like fire alarms, very similar. And we have them in the council now, and our officers in a crowded room watch those monitors quite closely. If they go anywhere near 400, 1400, the windows go open and we have a break, because the air quality isn't fair to the individuals in the meeting. But what I'm going about is public awareness. I'd like to see us use road signs differently. The weather forecast on the television could give us black spots, could give us areas where we know from experience air quality won't be very good. So am I making a fair point?
Yeah, definitely. So air quality warning systems are being looked at by local authorities. So Birmingham is looking at that, and so obviously the weather and the forecast is linked into that. So that can be both predictive and reactive. In terms of the air quality communications, so we did a perception survey on the Commonplace platform, which had about 850 respondents, I believe. And there is okay knowledge, but there is a real lack of knowledge in general areas, especially surrounding domestic combustion and the impacts of air quality. So we do need to do more there. So it is about, where we can, because one of the narratives we want to get away from is road transport is the main issue around it. It's definitely one of the significant issues with PM 2.5 being the main determinant of health outcomes for air pollution. It's road transport plus everything else. So it is a mixture of, idling is going to be less of an issue going forward, but just different journey planning. If you are vulnerable to be able to take other routes, so road signage could be one of the ways to bring that forward in people's mind. But it's also using sort of trusted advisors and other mechanisms, GPs where possible, health visitors, the fire service, everyone else, just so there is a coordinated message. And I think that's really what's missing at the moment. So if you live in Sandwell, you commute into Birmingham, they might be running 2 different separate air quality campaigns. That seems a bit nonsensical, because surely you should be running something at the same time. So the messaging's the same, you're getting peppered from all angles, and it's something which is effective and has been proven to be effective, but also is cost effective for the local authorities as well. So that will be part of the DEFRA behaviour change work, will be to see what actually is effective in the West Midlands and what can be rolled out on a wider scale in a more cost effective way.
We are also using the DEFRA funding, putting together an air quality literacy programme, as we're calling it, to provide information for policymakers, to make people aware of the kinds of things that you can take into consideration when planning, or for people developing communications plans as well, to show the different issues that are involved. So we're hoping that will also support some of this wider work as well.
Come back, Ian.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make a point over a wider awareness, you know, and some of the things I think we can do in the next stage. So I've said that, you know, if we, or it's only software really, and it would cost very little to get this message out that you know, this is a air quality black spot or whatever. We have these road signs that change format quite frequently. You know, beware of thieves, 40 mile an hour, think antigen drive. This sort of business we could add in a simple, not very expensive manner, the knowledge of air quality far more frequently into people's consciousness. That's the point.
Any more questions from anybody? No? Thank you very much, Jackie and Alex, and thank you for the report. And now we're going to be included in your governance structures. We'll see you back again. Thank you. Okay, that brings us on to, excuse me, on to agenda item 9, levelling up zones, investment zone and place-based strategy. Steve, are you going to open on this? I'm really hoping you'll come out with I really hope I come out with an understanding of this at the end because it knows my mind. So, your task.
No small, no small feat, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Steve Bowyer. I work in the Strategy, Economy and Net Zero Directorate. We're going to do a double header, myself and Jonathan, and I'll let Jonathan introduce himself. We'll take you through the second part of the paper. Yes, it is quite a challenge because there are a lot of zones jumping around at the moment. If I just do a little bit of a walk through how we've got to where we are, that might help set the scene. When we were, some of you will know, when we were developing our deeper devolution deal, our Trailblazer devolution deal, we realised that there was an opportunity to bring new funding streams together to focus them on priority areas across the region, use some of the new policy levers that may come from government, and those were developed into what we called levelling up zones. So they were very much envisaged as local authority identified areas where there was a good opportunity to level up. As part of our bid to government, we suggested a number of financial and fiscal measures that could be deployed in the levelling up zones. One of those was business rate retention. In the deeper devolution, we have, and it is, when one reads the deal, still somewhat confusing. We do have levelling up zones identified, but they are local authority designated areas where we perceive there to be a priority, and I'll come on to that. Government also gave us growth zones, and growth zones was the application of business rate retentions for 25 years at 100% within designated areas. So to put it geographically, if you imagine a levelling up zone is a much larger area within a local authority area, within that we could designate 3 growth zones, which would be much tighter development areas, offering local authority 100% business rate retention for 25 years. So that takes us into March this year. And what confuses the picture even more is at the same time, government separately to the devolution deal announced their National Investment Zone programme. Whether we inspired them to do this, we're not sure, but the deal in the investment zone is that you can designate an area which will attract 25 years business rate retention at 100%. So it's similar to a growth zone, but the difference being it is a national programme. And it was set by government across 8 combined authority areas in England, of which West Midlands was one. And effectively, the whole of the region is classed to be the investment zone, but then you will dedicate investment zones within it. How am I doing so far, Chair? Have I lost you already?
Yeah, completely.
Excellent. If only I could share some maps, but we will get to that point shortly. Investment zones effectively have 2 levers. One is tax incentives and the other is business rate retentions. So the tax incentives effectively are to draw investors in to the region in specific sites, and the business rate retention just gives the local authority or borrowing authority that confidence that over 25 years there'll be no reset to their business rate baseline, and they can obviously invest and borrow into bringing those sites forward. So, having painted that very confusing picture, the best way of describing it is the region as a whole, levelling up zones designated by local authorities, and within that, growth zones for business rate retention. National scheme, we had sites for the investment zone identified. Which are which and where? So we have identified 3 areas for investment zones. This is working with all of our local authority partners across the region. Those of you that have been following all papers over the last few months would have seen this go-to board. The 3 investment zone sites that have been previously shared are the Warwick Coventry Gigapark site, Birmingham Knowledge Quarter, so to the northeast coming out of Birmingham Centre, and the Wolverhampton Green Innovation Corridor. The important thing about the investment zone is that it is driving economic growth within a primary sector, and a primary sector agreed by the region in its broadest sense, because it incorporates Warwick and Warwickshire in that part, was advanced manufacturing, how it intersects with green industries, health tech, digital. So you can imagine how those sites in Coventry and Warwick, Birmingham and Wolverhampton came through in supporting that broad sectoral growth. We then have been looking at, and that will be levelling up zones across, because I'll pass on to Jonathan in a moment to talk about place-based strategies, levelling up zones, but we're identifying growth zones. So again, that enhanced lever for business rate retention across East Birmingham, North Solihull, with Dudley, Sandwell and Walsall, as they Wolverhampton benefiting from the investment zone. So effectively, this is a package of fiscal levers and financial opportunity, which leads through to the second part of the paper. And Jonathan, I may hand over to you to pick up on single settlement, which came through the inclusion deal, and how that's influencing our wider thinking on place-based approaches, and having some questions, which I can imagine what some of them might be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Steve, and very nice to see you all virtually. My name is Jonathan Gibson. I'm the Head of Policy and Public Affairs at the CA and work on the implementation of the deal in general and the single settlement in particular, amongst a few other things. So I think the picture that Steve has sketched out of how the variety of policy levers we now have in the deal through growth zones, investment zones, how they're coming together as levelling up zones. What we are excited about is how we can use the single settlement, which I'll come on to in a second, to support the kind of further development and growth of those zones, and potentially how we can support growth in other places across the West Midlands. But before we get to that, I will just give a brief summary of what the single settlement is for colleagues' benefit. So we will all be aware of how, at the minute, funding from government lands in the region at very different times with slightly different targets attached to that funding by government, and in a way that requires us to submit competitive bids. And what the single settlement does is move away from all of that. So it seeks to say, if we define what the combined authorities' functional responsibilities are with respect to key areas of funding, that every spending review, we would be allocated a share of funding by Treasury and government departments that would come to the combined authority, and we would then have the ability to plan how we're going to use that over a number of years. And so that, we think, is a very positive change, and there is a discussion with government now to make sure that the terms of that arrangement are correct, and we have been engaging with local authorities for about 3 months to make sure that we are all comfortable with the direction of travel. So in effect, the single settlement will devolve a single pot of funding to the region across a number of policy areas. Now that presents us with an exciting opportunity to say, how could we bring together funding for adult education, funding for housing and regeneration, for net zero, for local growth and place in transport? How could we bring together funding for those things in particular places, led by local authorities in a way that supports levelling up over 5, 10, 15-year time horizons. And so we've got a really exciting opportunity to bring together investment in places to really make an impact on levelling up across the region. Now, what we are having a conversation with local authorities about is you've been doing all this work on levelling up zones, which is great, and Steve has done a heroic job at presenting what is quite a complicated picture, because government has thrown lots of things at us and we've been having to make sense of them. And Steve, you've done a great job at that. But I think what I would say is with the single settlement, we can effectively go further in places than what we are able to do at the minute. And or we might find that the levers we have through the single settlement mean we should kind of accept the levelling up zones as this works in one particular area, but we might want to think about a broader geography elsewhere. So what I would leave you with is, in effect, we've done some great work through levelling up zones. The single settlement allows us to go further with them, and or to work out, actually, do we need a slightly different focus for investment in a different set of places? And all of that, we're really happy to work with yourselves on. We'll be working with local authority colleagues and have done so far on how we make this a reality over the coming months and years. And all of this will be, of course, coming to board for decisions. So I would leave that kind of thought with you there on. We've got a really good opportunity to build on and go further than levelling up zones, and we'll be working on that approach for the coming 3 months, and then much further beyond. I'll leave it there, but very happy to take any further questions.
Thank you. I open it up to questions. Councillor McKee.
Thanks very much. The retention of business rates is really, I can imagine, is a good incentive, but excuse me, if you're a council who's already getting 99% of your business rate retention anyway, 1% going off the fire service, and you're using that across your council area, how much incentive is this to, or how much extra money does this give you to invoke to actually spend in one of these zones, bearing in mind that money's probably already allocated already in the budget for the year?
Thank you. My colleagues in finance have prepared an infographic, which, if you're okay, I could put up on the slide. That works, hopefully. But please don't get too technical. I will share this note round afterwards, if that's okay, because I'll ask Carl and colleague Carl to extrapolate even further. But effectively, the really important thing on the, as it says there, growth zones and investment zones, is the baseline and above it. So effectively, and the key word incremental. So effectively, below that red dotted line is what you'll be familiar with through your normal business rate regimes, etc. The growth zone investment zone means that any incremental growth beyond that over a 25-year period is retained at 100%, regardless of reset. And it's that reset's the critical point. Now, there are 2 points to caveats on that. One is the difference in the terms between the growth zone and the investment zone. So as an investment zone, that's why I emphasised the national scheme perspective as this. This is a national policy driving economic growth in a particular sector. So through the investment zone, government have made it quite clear that that incremental growth should support the continuing growth of the investment zone for that sector, etc. And the surpluses will be reallocated by the combined authority, so national policy, into making sure that sector grows across the area as a whole. But first and foremost, that those business rates retained need to make sure that the investment zone comes forward fundamentally. Now, in the growth zones, there isn't that same requirement that it goes into that primary sector, which is why they align so closely with the levelling up zone priorities. And as Jonathan started to outline, how local authorities are looking for priorities across the area, because if you imagine in the growth zone, that funding can then go to wider levelling up growth projects. You've got greater freedom for that. I'm hoping that image helps a little bit, but it may not. Business rate retention is a difficult area, or business rates as a whole is a difficult area. So, let alone, I've asked my colleagues to try and explain VAT to me as well as a follow-up to this one.
I mean, but VAT and business, VAT is actually quite compared. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can just say, I mean, from my sort of simple maths, you know, if you're only getting 50% of your business rate, this looks a really good deal. If you're already getting 99%, yeah, it's a bit more jam tomorrow, isn't it, really? But am I being overly harsh?
The key bit I would focus on is that reset point, that there is no reset to this. So effectively, any incremental growth beyond that is a bonus, whereas at a reset, it all comes in below the baseline. That's the critical bit, alongside the certainty of the 25 years as well. Because if you can imagine some of the investment sites we're bringing forward, having that certainty to underpin your borrowing is far more powerful as well.
Any other questions from the council? That's the Bateman.
Sounds reasonably good.
Is that down with faint praise?
The question I'm asking, where's the weakness in what you've given?
That is a really very good question. Where is the weakness? On the investment zone, we are still working, negotiating with government as to where, so there's a series of gateways that we have to comply with the government. We're at Gateway 4, where we're identifying interventions. The final one is Gateway 5, which is delivery. So we're still working with government exactly how we apply those benefits. There is also, I should have mentioned, I do apologise, Chair, should have mentioned at the outset, the investment zone also has a pot of £80 million, which you can use for tax incentives or for direct funding, which in some sites is exactly what's needed. It's just spend to get those sites away. Where is the weakness? One weakness, I guess, is that investment zone business rate retention is a national policy. Therefore, you have lesser freedom as to where the business rates go, because it has to be an economic drive for that primary sector. Government, we are working with government that actually recognising that whole relationship between local authorities' business rates regime at the moment and that switch to a key primary economic sector is actually, we want to make sure that it doesn't disadvantage local authorities. So we just have to make sure that. Is there any other weakness within the levelling up, so the growth zones? Not really, provided we make sure that there's a whole lot of financial modelling which sits behind that. We just need to make sure that financial modelling is robust, I would say, to make sure that we're getting that long-term investment going forward.
I read 5.1, the legal implications of the payment. I've now better grasp on this than the chair, the able way you described your situation for the whole paper. I wondered again where the legal implications are they able to be set in more set in stone for us, or is it a case of us having to receive what we get from government that sets around the legal implications? To me, I think this is very woolly. That's what I'm trying to say. What you said at the start.
So I think legal implications, there are a number of things, and Jonathan, I may hand over to you on the single settlement if that's okay. And but on the wider levelling up zones and investment zones, on the investment zones, we know it's government policy, and therefore we just comply with what that's required. But we are working with government on how they term it co-design and co-development. So identifying the sites which offer the best benefit for the sector, etc. So on the investment zone, that is a national policy. On the growth zone, we have an opportunity to shape that within the region to make sure that it does meet what we need within the region. As we develop both the levelling up zones, the growth zones, and the investment zone detail, clearly we can highlight the governance structures around that as we go forward. So that's one is sort of out of our hands in that it's investment zone national policy. The other is for us to shape as a region much more.
Councillor Waters.
The implementation of this is going to be one size fits all around North Midlands, rather than being different in different areas. So when the councils receive the actual implementation of the way it's going to work, the structure is going to be the same no matter what borough you're working. Because a lot at the moment with business rates, it depends on what area you're actually in to how the business rates actually work.
So just to say that actually was a fundamental point behind the levelling up zones. Why we wanted to approach levelling up zones through the whole Trailblazer devolution deal was that they were to meet the requirements of the local area. So all of the levelling up zones, and therefore how those growth zone fiscal measures are applied, are being designated and identified by our local authority partners. So you will see within the levelling up zones greater focus, for example, on how do we use some of financial measures through the devolution deal around housing, for example, in a different way, affordable housing. Is there a priority for a particular cluster or sector economically within those areas? So the levelling up zones are very, very much, we used the word in the Trailblazer devolution deal, bespoke. Those are designated by local authority partners and clearly meet the needs of those areas. On the investment zone, you're absolutely right. That is a national policy, which is why we've tried to broaden the definition of advanced manufacturing as widely as we have into the green industries, obviously into core advanced manufacturing, battery production, etc., but into green industries, into health tech, into digital, because they are, as we move through industry 4.0, all of those interrelated. They all have digital platforms underpinning advanced manufacturing. So yes, we will have to apply that rigor of an economic focus in investment zone, but we are working with local authority partners almost on a daily basis to shape what that actually means in terms of the investment we're trying to get into the region, and therefore what else we can come off it. I should also say that within the investment zone pot, there is some revenue funding, and we're looking at how that supports skills development across the region as well. So all of the university partners and others have been really heavily involved in advising some of those investments as well. And again, they've got to meet the requirements of the area, but it goes back to Jonathan's point about how do we build this all into a sensible package which is fit for the right area, for the area within the region. Because if we've got the single settlement levers, we've got this business rate retention levers, we've got the investment levers, they've got to meet the community needs within the area, and they've got to knit together, which is the work that Jonathan and his team are trying to do off the back of that. And the last piece to mention on the investment zone is within the revenue funding. We are encouraging government that part of that is for capacity, and that is a capacity for all of the partners involved in investment zones, whether that's on accelerating planning applications, permissions, whether that's on the financial modelling platform. So we're aware that actually what we can't do is just bring all of this in as and parachute it onto providers. But hopefully you can see how it is complex, but if we can get those conversations, it should have a massive impact in areas themselves.
I think the question from me at the moment is how far into the future can we expect to start to see the benefit from these plans? You know, we've been talking about the gigapark for as long as I've been coming to these meetings, and whilst the idea about the business rate retention, the tax incentives, brilliant, but I don't know how much further forward we are on that particular scheme. So my concern is around when will local authorities or the region as a whole start to benefit from these schemes?
So in purely practical terms, the investment zone should launch on the 1st of April 2024. But the private sector are aware of this already and are aware that we are one of the 8 that was identified as having an investment zone. And it is genuinely sparking strong, very, very strong private investor interest at the moment. I obviously can't say more because a lot of those are subject to commercial confidentiality, but it is already starting to drive that interest. And one insight I will share that on a business group recently, a major employer said, when can we start using this ourselves as collateral for going out to the market to encourage more investors in? Because that brand of an investment zone is really, really important, let alone the tax incentives and the financial measures you bring forward. It is important for investors. Yeah, and as I say, I wish I could say more, but it is genuinely sparking very, very strong interest.
Yeah, and obviously that's a positive. So, but yeah, it is just the length of time between where how long this has been. We've been talking about some of these schemes to when we actually start to see the benefits of it. Okay, I'm not seeing any other indications of questions. So, thank you for that presentation. I think I'm somewhat clearer than I was at the outset, but don't test me on it. Thank you for the presentation. We are only asked to note the development of this paper, which we are now in quorum because Councillor Akhtar had to leave to go to another meeting. So we're just asked to note that, so we can now move on. That takes us on to the grant register. Okay, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously the grant register, which is your usual standing paper in there, so for note and comment. Not too much on there this month in terms of new grants that are on there. Just to note, the 14.1 million is part of the wider £24 million for the Business Energy Advice Service. Got that right? For you, and that's part of the that was paper that went to the September board, so you can go to all details are in there. That is a joint team between DLUC and Presents, and that's the one part of the money, and we're just locking down the other part with DLUC as well for that. So happy to take any questions on any information or anything in the grant register.
Any questions for Kate on the grant register? I've just got one, Kate, on the biodiversity net gain. Is that regional spend or will that be devolved to local authorities?
It is regional spend. It's one we sort of get every year almost without asking. It's one that we it's one that comes out, but regional spend, it goes into the team here who have to find the work that they do regionally.
Thank you. No questions from anybody? No? Okay, we will move on then. Thank you. The Open Scrutiny Committee Work Programme, the noting and the Combined Authority Board Plan also for noting. Nobody's got any questions or points on those. That just leaves me then to advise of the mayoral Q&A budget workshop, which will be a hybrid arrangement on the 1st of December. If you are intending to attend via Teams, please request the link of Lindsay for that. I would encourage people to attend it. It is really helpful preparation for the mayoral Q&A, and that will be the next formal meeting of this committee, and that will take place on the 14th of December at 2 o'clock again. We do need to be quorum for that particular meeting. So thank you everybody for your attendance today and your questioning to officers. Thank you.
Yeah, say 2 o'clock for the budget.
Yeah, Q&A. Yeah, don't turn up at 10 because you'll have a long wait.